Another great Tuesday night at Madison City Council. Tuesday, March the 22nd, we are streaming live on City of Madison's YouTube channel. We'll also be archiving this, so it's available online. We have a pretty simple agenda tonight, but we welcome everybody here. We'll start by rising, removing our hats, bowing our heads, reciting the Lord's Prayer, Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get to business. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I never get tired of reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, honestly. We have a great agenda tonight, but we'll first start with the roll call.
Tavenel.
Here.
Krebs.
Here.
Luciatella. Here. Schaefer.
Here.
Chadwin.
Here.
Bartlett.
Here.
Danitella.
Here.
Okay, our clerk treasurer may be able to join us in a little bit. She is working on a important matter right now. Council, have you had an opportunity to review the very brief minutes from March the 8th, 2022? And if you have, we'll entertain a motion and a second to approve the minutes, or we can modify them.
I move to approve the minutes from the March 8th, 2022 meeting as presented.
I will second that.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Thank you. And moving on, we do have a resolution and the first reading of two ordinances. So let's start with our Council Devin Sharp here with the resolution.
Resolution 27, 2022, a resolution establishing the policy by which members of the Common Council may participate by electronic means of communication. Whereas, I guess it's a House bill, an Indiana code, effective April 20th of 2021, and as amended in the Indiana code, to prescribe new requirements by which members of the governing body of a public policy of a political subdivision may participate in a meeting by any electronic means of communication, whereas a member of the governing body may participate by any means of communication that allows all participating members of the governing body to simultaneously communicate with each other, and except for a meeting that is an executive session, allows the public to simultaneously attend and observe the meeting. Whereas the act requires the governing body to adopt a written policy establishing the procedures that apply to members' participation in a meeting by electronic means of communication, and may adopt procedures that are more restrictive than the procedures established by the Indiana Code. And whereas the Common Council is the governing body of the City of Madison, Indiana. Now therefore it may be resolved by the Common Council of the City of Madison, Section 1, Section A, the provisions of the Act, including definitions, apply to this resolution. B, this resolution shall be known as the Electronic Meetings Policy of the Council and applies to the Council, Board of Public Works and Safety, Historic District Board of Review, Redevelopment Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, Board of Park Commissioners, PACE, Program Review Board, and Plan Commission. Section 2A, subject to Sections 3 and 5, any member may participate in a meeting by any electronic means of communication that 1, allows participating members of the governing body to simultaneously communicate with each other, and 2, other than a meeting that is an executive session, allows the public to simultaneously attend and observe the meeting. B, a member who participates by electronic means of communication, 1, shall be considered present for purposes of establishing a quorum, and may participate in action only if the member can be seen and heard. C, all votes taken during a meeting at which at least one member participates by an electronic means of communication must be taken by roll call vote. Section 3, at least 50% of the members must be physically present at a meeting in which a member will participate by means of electronic communication. Not more than 50% of the members may participate by electronic means of communication at the same meeting. B, not more than 25% of the meetings in a calendar year may be held with a member participating by electronic means. C, a member may not attend more than 25% of the meetings in a calendar year by electronic means of communication, unless the member's electronic participation is due to military service, illness or medical condition, death of a relative, or an emergency involving actual or threatened injuries to person or property. D, a member may not attend 2 consecutive meetings, a set of meetings by electronic communication. The member must attend in person at least 1 meeting between sets of meetings that the member attends by electronic communication, unless the member's absence is due to military service, illness, or medical condition, death of a relative, or an emergency involving actual or threatened injury to persons or property. A member may not attend a meeting by electronic means if the member lacks the technological wherewithal to accomplish this. The minutes or memorandum of a meeting in which any member participates by electronic means of communication must identify each member who was physically present at the meeting, participated in the meeting by electronic means of communication, and was absent, and identify the electronic means by which members participated in the meeting and members of the public attended and observed the meeting if the meeting was not an executive session. Section 5, no member of the council may participate by means of electronic communication in a meeting in which the council may take final action to adopt a budget, make a reduction in personnel, initiate a referendum, impose or increase a fee, impose or increase a penalty, exercise the council's power of eminent domain, or establish, impose, raise, or renew a tax. Section 6, if an emergency is declared by 1, the governor under Indiana Code or the mayor under Indiana Code, members are not required to be physically present for a meeting until the emergency is terminated. B, members may participate in a meeting by any means of communication provided that at least a quorum of members participate in a meeting by means of electronic communication or in person. The public may simultaneously attend and observe the meeting unless the meeting is an executive session. The minutes or memorandum of the meeting must comply with Section 4 of this resolution. All votes taken during a meeting at which at least 1 member participates by electronic means of communication must be taken by roll call vote. And Section 7, this resolution shall be effective from and after adoption by this council and in compliance with the Indiana Code.
Council, I'll give you a little bit of background. During the public health emergency, as this indicated, both the governor and the mayor had declared an emergency which waived some of the rules with regards to public meetings. This is part of the open door statute for the state of Indiana, and all we're really trying to do here is create some flexibility, acknowledging that for some meetings, it's imperative that those meetings continue, and that we accommodate some members' lack of physically being able to be present. We did quite a bit of this during the public health emergency, where initially a lot of our meetings were being done via Zoom or some other platform. We still utilize that, not very often. This isn't intended to be a replacement for the actual physical participation in meetings. This is really to be on the exception basis. We have almost 24 boards and committees, and only about a half a dozen or so are the ones we're highlighting here, where we would allow electronic means of participation. We still focus on transparency. That's the number one thing here. That's why a lot of these requirements are here with regards to being able to be seen and heard. And if there is a public emergency, then different rules would apply, and you could have even more flexibility with regard to the meeting. So here all we're trying to do is adopt a resolution that gives us the flexibility to do things, allow members to participate electronically. We had already established what I would consider best practices for participating in meetings electronically, so that there could be some consistency with those, both the environment, the technology, the dress code, conduct, those types of things. So we'll continue to communicate those, and there will be an educational process with each of these boards here. But again, this is something that, because of the public health emergency, Indiana legislature and the governor signed this into law, which now we can act upon and have it if we need it. That's the background. Like a motion and a second to approve resolution 272022, and then we'll open it up to comments and questions.
I move we approve resolution 27-2022 as presented.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's open it up to additional comments or questions from either council or the audience.
In section 3, B and C, it almost, I guess, seems as though those aren't quite in alignment. 25% is the limit for an individual member, barring a few specific circumstances. But then for the entire council or the board, the limit is also 25%. So if that member is allowed to miss more than 25%, then the board as a whole would also be able to miss 25%, or to have 25% of the meetings or more.
Well, I think the intent there, and I'll read it more clearly, is that we didn't want a member to do it every single time,
Yeah.
and we didn't want an electronic meeting every single month.
I guess I'm concerned if there is an
So you're saying B and
excuse.
C?
Yeah, from 1 through 4, those excuses, those reasons for allowing a member to be missing for more than 25% don't seem to be addressed in B, to allow that particular board or council to actually hold meetings with a member remote for more than 25%. This seems to be in conflict. I understand the intent there, but the language seems to be in conflict.
Okay.
So whether that just means that B should say except as noted.
Except as noted in C, but would that be a clarification you'd like to suggest?
Yes.
Okay.
That kind of led to my question about section 5, the meetings that are not allowed to have electronic attendance. Does anybody have any estimate of what percent of the meetings those are? The budget, something that's a couple times a year. I guess once to adopt, but the other ones, are those frequently enough to conflict with 25%? Would it cause operational issues?
That's in the state statute, so we were able to make some of the changes to make this more restrictive, which we did, so that it's not eligible for all board meetings. I mean, I can tell you in the 2.5 years we've been here, we've never worked on a referendum. Water rates is something we're discussing now. We've had one meeting with regards to trash rates. We've not done anything with regard to imminent, they're very, very rare. But these are very, very important things, which is why you wouldn't want them all
Yeah,
here
understood.
physically.
In the last 7 years, you could count on one hand the number of times we've discussed these things, I believe.
Okay.
With the exception of adopting the budget.
Well, adopting the budget's annual. Adopting the budget, of course, is annual.
And then the last question I had was, what you mentioned Zoom, do you have any other, is there any plan for what those technological means will be? Obviously, it addresses if the member of the board or council doesn't have the wherewithal, that's their own problem to deal with, but is there do we have the devices that would be needed to ensure good communication? Or is that something
We will not be
you're-
giving any council devices.
Not to the members, but in the
What I would expect is that during the public health emergency, we had a subscription to Zoom, and so we would probably renew that. There's other platforms like Google Teams and other platforms. We'll probably just go back to renewing the subscription with Zoom.
And you have good webcams and mic or whatever.
What we would generally do and had done previously is just connect our laptop to the monitor. And the requirement here is that the public can see and hear that person. It's not that the public will be participating via Zoom. They will still be participating in a variety of means, either physically being here or watching the meeting, streaming. But we will have a laptop, and then that will be connected to our monitor so we can see and hear the person who is on participating electronically. The other thing too is that I'll just mention is that a person can still participate electronically, but if they don't have the technologies to be seen or heard, then they won't be counted as in attendance. That's a little bit of a clarification. So there's still probably more flexibility in this than what this says, because right now somebody can still do that. They're just listening in and not counted as in attendance of the meeting. Any other comments or questions? What I'm hearing now is proposed amendment to section 3, paragraph B, to begin with, except as set forth in paragraph C. Is that a correct motion, Councilman Schaefer?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we need a second on that.
I'll second.
Any discussion, comments or questions? Let's approve the amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. And we'll go back to the original. So we've got an amendment to Resolution 27-2002. We already have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Any comments or questions?
I have something.
Okay,
There's at least 5 typos in here. Will those be cleaned up?
we can clean those up. We got this document up from the state, and it was hard to format.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the like lack of spaces in a couple places?
Yeah.
I was just telling you that.
Okay.
Yeah. Any additional comments or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the first reading of 2 ordinances. The Cable Advisory Board.
Ordinance 2022-1, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Madison, Indiana, amending certain portions of the City of Madison Cable Advisory Ordinance and interlocal agreement as found in Chapter 33.120 of the City of Madison Municipal Code. Whereas the City of Madison previously adopted a Cable Advisory Board ordinance and corresponding interlocal agreement and now finds it necessary to amend such ordinance. Whereas the City of Madison desires to amend the Cable Advisory Board ordinance number 2001-7 in order to have a better and fully functioning Cable Advisory Board. And whereas the City of Madison seeks to correct an error previously made to such ordinance and hereby adopts the following. Now therefore be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Madison, Indiana, that the Cable Advisory Board ordinance previously enacted be amended to amend 33.120 members and term section A to reflect that the number of board members from each unit shall be reduced from 3 to 2. Be it further ordained by the Common Council of the City of Madison, Indiana, that the Cable Advisory Board ordinance previously enacted be amended to amend 33.122C1 duties to remove the portion that reads currently approved by the local governmental units. This ordinance shall become immediately effective upon its adoption by the Common Council, signature of the mayor, enrollment in the book of ordinances, and publication of notice as required by law. Any ordinance in conflict with this ordinance is hereby repealed.
And this is sponsored by Councilman Bartlett. Councilman, if you'd like to give a little introduction to this for edification of the council, you're free to do so now, and then we'll have the second reading at the next meeting.
Really, this is a pretty simple change that we're requesting. The current board, frankly, because of its size, but remember it's a board comprised of representatives from 3 governmental bodies, is simply larger than it needs to be, and that creates more confusion and more confusion than is necessary. By reducing it from 3 from each governmental entity to 2 from each governmental entity, we can therefore reduce a significant amount of that confusion and become a much more efficient board. The second change in here, originally the contracts with the cable providers was negotiated by the local governmental entities. And so that statement was in the ordinance, in the interlocal agreement. Those contracts are now negotiated by the state of Indiana. The local governing bodies no longer have input there. So we're simply removing the line that says currently approved by local governmental units, because we can't approve them.
Councilman, I think that's a good introduction. The original ordinance was created in 2001, so it's been over 20 years, and it's now time to, like many of our ordinances, to dust them off and make them applicable for how you're conducting business today. So that'll be on second reading at the April 5th council meeting. Second ordinance.
Joe would.
Be glad to get a motion from the board.
You want to give a title to it, and
Yeah.
then we'll do an introduction of it. Maybe that'll get in the record.
All right. Joe Wood. Ordinance 2022-2, an ordinance amending the interlocal agreement regarding emergency dispatching, communications, and other services. I could read the start and that.
Okay.
Good intro. Whereas Jefferson County, the city of Madison, and the town of Hanover are empowered to provide emergency communications services to the citizens within their respective jurisdictions, and may therefore, pursuant to Indiana Code, enter into an interlocal agreement with one another and with other public agencies to perform such services. Whereas the city, county, and town have previously entered into an interlocal agreement regarding emergency communication services. Whereas the county has an emergency communications dispatch center and systems capable of providing emergency communication services to law enforcement agencies, fire departments, and emergency medical service providers within the county. Whereas the county, city, and town believe emergency dispatch and communication services, as well as other services, would be best served by being managed through a 911 communications administrative board. Whereas the city and town desire to obtain emergency dispatch and emergency communication services from the county, and whereas this county, city, and town recognize that it is in the best interests of the citizens within their respective jurisdiction and the furtherance of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens to have a unified emergency dispatch and communication system having the advantage of economies of scale. Whereas this county, city, and town have agreed to amend the interlocal agreement as outlined below to reflect the current needs of each entity. Whereas the governing body of each party has resolved, agreed, or ordained that this is an interlocal agreement to which each can agree. That's the introduction.
This is sponsored by Councilman Dan Datillo. Dan, I know you're relatively new to the 911 board, so if you don't mind, I'll give an introduction.
Absolutely.
The interlocal agreement between Jefferson County, City of Madison, and Hanover has probably been in effect for about 15 years, and was last amended in November of 2019. As we have gone through the last couple of years, City of Madison and all three of the governmental entities that are part of this interlocal agreement wanted to make some clarifications relative to kind of roles and responsibilities of the various committees that are embedded in the interlocal agreement. The other thing that we wanted to do was focus a little bit more on the budgeting aspect of 911, because this is all of the employees that work for Central Dispatch are county employees. The budgeting process is a little bit different than our normal, which is while we are budgeting for our participation in the Central Dispatch in this interlocal agreement, Hanover and Jefferson County are doing the same thing. Sometimes those budgets don't line up, and over the course of the last decade or so, there has been an accumulation of excess funds in central dispatch accounts because they operate off of a state fund and then also the local contributions from all three of us. So what we have proposed and the other two governmental entities have agreed to is a true-up after the end of the year. So while we are projecting what we think our central dispatch costs are, what our equipment purchases need to be, as that is being planned for and approved at the 911 advisory board level, we really don't know exactly how the budget's going to turn out, which is why we want to do a look back at the beginning of each year. And if there are excess funds, we want to be able to do a true up and have those dollars amounts redistributed back to each governmental entity. So we did that beginning in 2022. We did a look back, and the estimated true up resulted in approximately $70,000 to $80,000 in accumulated funds after all the budgeting of operational and capital expenditures were taken into effect, leaving that much money that could be reimbursed back to the governmental entity. So the way we fund this is on a percentage basis, and the very, very back of the document outlines the percentages. But we'll get into more of this at the next meeting when we have public comment on this. But we did put in, I think, tools such that we are funding what it costs to operate and for capital planning, but there is some more meaningful oversight into the budget process going into the future. Because as everybody knows here, we need every dollar that we can for our budgets, and it was a bit of surprise, I think, to everybody that we had accumulated it's quite a bit of money in the 911 budget that had not been spent. Coincidentally, they found a purpose for spending it once we started talking about the excess. So that's all good. But anyway, that's an introduction, and Dan's a new member to the board, and we meet monthly. Central dispatch is critical for public safety, and I think the definition that's really added to the various different committees is also really important. So that's why we have this before you today. Another ordinance which really needs to be thoughtfully looked at on a regular basis.
Quick question. I have 3 copies of this in my packet. Should these all be the same, or should we mark draft?
I don't know why you have 3 copies. What I have in mind is a red line. So I don't know if you have a red line and a document that is not red line.
Okay.
I wanted to give you a red line so you can see the changes to it. And that is it. Moving on to reports, recommendations, and other business from standing and select study committees of City Council. Comes to Chad, is there anything?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, and we will start our reports of city officials again at the April 5th meeting as we roll into a new quarter. That puts us down to miscellaneous. If there's anything that council would like to bring up.
Question about appointments to the Historic District Board of Review.
Yeah.
I was concerned after reading that article in the paper a week or so ago. Do you have any updates on the last 2 members that?
We're still looking. As you know, sometime last year, we created an online portal where volunteers can submit their interest form for serving on committees. And that's a very difficult board, so we've not had a lot of interest. So we have to personally recruit that board. But that also there's also some requirements in the ordinance for the Historic Board of Review members. We do have 1 application now that we're reviewing, and that's a 7-person board. What you read about was one of the members couldn't be present at the last meeting, which they still had a quorum because it's 4 persons that were there. But that is a very unique ordinance because unlike every other action we take where it's a majority vote to pass a motion, this one takes a majority vote to vote down a motion effectively. And so that's an application process for individuals that want to make certain improvements to their properties that are subject to the historic district ordinance. But the issue with that one was there were 4 members there, but it would require all 4 members to vote no instead of 3 members vote no and 1 member vote yes. So in that instance, one vote essentially passed all of the applications on to approval. But we are still looking for 2 members. Is there anything else? Well, we'll go to one of my favorite parts, which is public comments. This is where we open up the podium to anybody in the community that would like to address the Mayor's Office or Board of Public Works. We just ask you to come to the podium and give your name and address and whatever topic you'd like to share with the Mayor's Office or Council. Everyone being shy. Okay. Well, having done, I will go to the second part of my favorite part of the meeting, which is the Mayor's comments. It's always great because we have a lot of meetings all the time, and so some of you may participate in them. Council might be on some different boards and committees, but there's a lot going on all across the organization. So I like to give a brief update as to some of the major things we're working on that I think is important for council and the community to learn about and be aware of. So at the next council meeting, April 5th, we will have our Economic Development Director, Tony Steinhardt, give a annual report to council, which is a required by statute financial report of our redevelopment commission. That report has already been provided to the redevelopment commission, and now it's ready to just be presented to you, and what he'll share with you effectively is what the statement of financial position is for redevelopment commission. In that annual report is also a breakdown of the assessed value of every parcel that is in the various allocation areas across our TIF district. So when you hear redevelopment commission, TIF district, pretty much synonymous, but we do have some statutory reporting requirements, and the annual financial report is a public report. It's first given to the redevelopment commission, then it's presented to city council, and then all of that information is loaded into Gateway, and then anybody in the public can see that report and any other report of the city online. As I mentioned in Board of Public Works yesterday, we're moving into second phase of our clean drinking water project. We have now submitted, based on council's approval at the last meeting, the application for Indiana Finance Authority's state revolving loan fund for financing of our water project, which is estimated to cost approximately $13 million. And now we're moving into the stage of financing, and part of that financing is not only levels of debt and potentially grants we can get, state water infrastructure grants from SRF, but also the rate ordinance that's going to need to be evaluated. And the basis for discussing the rate ordinance is an updated water rate cost study that was performed by our consultant, and that will be presented to council as part of the ordinance reading process with water rates. We have to have an increase in our water rates in order to finance the construction and operations of our water utility. It cannot be subsidized by property taxes, for example, like much of our operations are. So that process will begin no later than the second meeting in April. The third thing I want to mention to you is you might have read that City of Madison received a recent award from Indiana Department of Transportation. We're excited about this. This was the funding for phase 2 of our Main Street project, which is going to be conducted over several years in 3 phases. At the end of 2020, we received approximately almost $4 million for the first $5 million of work to be performed, which will be started on the west end, which is Hanover Hill down to the railroad bridge. Phase 2 was awarded last week in the approximate amount of $9 million by NDOT. It was the largest award to a community across the state, and that will fund approximately $10.3 million of the second phase, which will take us from a railroad bridge to approximately Mill Street. And those funds will be available in, the first two phases will be available in the state's fiscal years 26 and 27, which is the City of Madison's calendar years 25 and 26. As soon as the call for projects happens by NDOT for 2028 fiscal year, we will apply for the third phase of funding, which will then complete that project, and that'll take us from Mill Street to Jefferson Street. And as you know, it's been about 15 years since any major infrastructure work has been done on that corridor. It was formerly State Highway 56 that the city acquired through a state road transfer agreement with NDOT in the summer of 2020. So a lot happening with regards to the Main Street revisioning and that steering committee. Lastly, I'll mention just a tremendous amount of economic development continuing. We've already announced the mixed-use development on the hilltop. We are also close to finalizing the economic development agreement with Super ATV's expansion, which will bring approximately 245 new high-paying jobs. And we have several other projects in the works, both that are relate to our destination development plans and our workforce development plan. And we are now making our way to the tail end of the new 5-year master parks plan. So all of this, because there's so much tremendous need for investment all across our community. One of the most important things we're doing is a capital plan. We are doing a capital plan that Tony will be finalizing and presenting to Redevelopment Commission and then eventually City Council, that shows where we have lacked investment or need to create more investment to get the outcomes that we want for promoting our community, updating and upgrading streets, sidewalks, parks, utilities, housing, and our tourism corridors, including grocery store downtown, which we also have lots of positive momentum on. So a lot of fantastic things happening across the state. When we talked about this a few months ago, we literally did a year's worth of economic development planning in a matter of months to respond to a statewide call for grants that culminated in our Regional Development Authority, which we're one of 5 counties, receiving one of the state's largest awards of $50 million. In Jefferson County alone, that will create about $250 million of economic impact in the next 3 years. So we're excited to work with all of our literally dozens of partners across the community in bringing to our community this capital investment and, again, improving the quality of life, economic opportunity for everybody that either works, visits, and calls Madison home or invests in business here. So fantastic things going on. Those are the 4 things I wanted to bring up to you today. I could talk about another hour more. I know everybody's excited about all the stuff that's going on because there's so much energy happening here in town. I'll pause there, answer any questions you might have, and we'll maybe have an early meeting.
What the timing is on receiving feedback on the loan application?
That was the application was due by the end of March, and probably by the end of May we will receive feedback from IFA on our application.
That would be either package or denial?
Well, we're not expecting that it'll be a denial because the way that process worked, we had to actually apply to them over a year ago and let them know that we're working on a project so they could evaluate whether or not we met the base criteria to even be considered, and we did. So the way it works, it's a statewide bond fund, so they are essentially looking statewide on all different types of utility projects, municipal utility projects going on, and they are the ones going out and bonding at the state level, and then we will be a subrecipient of those bond funds. So they essentially did a call of, hey, does anybody have a project? And we responded to that probably a year ago, because we've been working on this for so long. But there's a sequence of steps we have to go through. They did indicate months ago that we were, on their list. It was a very, very anecdotal list of, yeah, if you get approved, you're on our list as we start to frame up the financing that's gonna be needed. And then what happened beyond that was the, new legislation at the federal level that approved all the infrastructure funding. So where we had applied last summer for a SWIFT grant and was denied because our rates were deemed too low, and that our community was not burdened by high water rates like other communities across the state. Now that they have infrastructure money, they are automatically enrolling us in for consideration of SWIFT grant, even though we were denied the first time. So it looks to me like what they intend to do is look at our project. Now that we've submitted our asset management plan, a 900-page document everyone got the pleasure of reviewing. They'll look at the critical scope of work that needs to be done that's urgent. They'll compare that with all the other projects that are happening across the state. And now they'll look at not only what are they borrowing, but how many hundreds of millions of dollars did they get from federal grants that now they're going to want to deploy across the community. So we expect that they'll come back and say, we'll loan you X and give you this amount of money too, which then will obviously help us defray the overall cost. That's what's made a little bit of this process lengthy and complicated, because there's so many moving parts to it. Did I answer your question, Josh? Anything else on that?
I think it's good.
Okay.
With the Main Street grant, is there a matching funds requirement?
Yes. The good news is, unlike the community crossing grant where there is a dollar for dollar match, there is only a 20% match here. So like the first phase, which is also federal highway dollars, is an 80-20 split. So before we can draw down any of these dollars in 2026 or 2027, because we can go all the way to their fiscal year, we will have to have our match money committed, which is why we're doing all the capital planning.
What, with this grant specifically, what type of work is anticipated?
It's very comprehensive. The first phase is mostly asphalt repair. As you remember, we had a portion of Hanover Hill that collapsed. We did some intermediate repairs on it, but the base on it really needs to be repaired. But as you get closer to town, what we're looking at is the sidewalks, the paving, the power and the lighting, modernizing cross signals in order to make pedestrian activity safer. While we have the road tore up, we can also evaluate what our need is from a utility perspective. So this really gives us a very, very comprehensive view of looking at that corridor as something way more than just a transportation corridor. Moving cars from point A to point B. And as I said at the state of the city, State Highway 56 was about moving people from one destination to another. The Main Street revisioning project is really about what do we do to make sure Madison's the destination. And it is about the things we've already been doing: traffic calming, pedestrian safety, doing things that are more what I would say conducive for our mixed use, our commercial and our residential districts.
So this grant is on top of the one that was announced last year for repaving?
Yeah, about a year ago.
Okay, so that one will still be taking place to repave the entire.
That's the first phase, and that's mostly an asphalt project.
Okay.
And then the third phase will do something similar to what I just described for phase 2. But east of Mill Street all the way to Jefferson Street. So it will really impact the central business district. This project, what makes it so complicated, Councilman, is that it is very, very distinct corridors. You've got the central district that's got all of our specialty shops and restaurants in it, and then you move to more of a specialty district that's mixed use with housing and some businesses. And then when you get further to the west end, it's mostly all residential again. So it's really interesting and creates challenges, but it's also an opportunity to just take something that has been mostly just a traffic corridor for cars and industrial traffic for the last century and modernize it for what we need that is also compatible with our community community-based investment model. That's why this is so exciting and why timing couldn't be better for dollars to come into our community. And it's all fitting into a giant puzzle with regards to the Easton Bridge approach and the transfer of the highway to becoming a local road. And as you know, we have a tremendous amount of tourism downtown where we need to be more thoughtful about, you know, what do we want downtown Madison to be? And I think most, if not definitely a majority of people agree, it's way more than just moving cars. It's about moving people, building experiences, creating gathering spaces, cultivating a pro-business environment, improving property values. There's so much to it. Not just Main Street, but what we do on Main Street will have an effect on the entire city. So as we put together these two economic development plans, destination and workforce, what we have to do is be ready to invest. And that's why our capital planning is so critical. So we can have a thoughtful plan of what we're going to do, consensus on what that involves, how do we make it impactful, how do we pay for it, and how do we deal with the needs of our community for the next generation. Fun stuff, and a lot of great work being done in that regard. And we haven't done it without a lot of thought, because if you've seen over the course of the past year and a half, we've also engaged a lot of professional studies to help guide this process. From a design, traffic management, parking, housing studies, master park planning. There's just a lot of work being done so that we can grow our community in the right way. Probably more than you want to hear on that question, but I could talk for another hour on this stuff. This is good stuff. Right, Michael?
It is. Absolutely.
Got two Michaels in the audience. It's all fantastic stuff because some of these things are long overdue, but also some of these things are just something we have to do now because we're just at a different point in the history of our community, and we have the baton. So what are we going to do with it for the next generation? And I will mention too is one final thought, and that is it's not just what's happening here in the mayor's office. It's what's happening all across the community. The boards, the committees, the volunteer work, the organizations that have the same goals that we have, which is how do we make the quality of life in Madison exceptional? We are already being recognized statewide and regionally as being on the map of doing some of the right things that will make our quality of life, is making our quality of life exceptional. And at the end of the day, that's what will draw people to our community. That is already what is drawing literally tens of millions of dollars of private capital investment to Madison and Jefferson County. That is how we've erased a half a century decline in negative population growth. And that is how we're able to take advantage of modern workforce needs and what a community or what a person seeks from its community. We're poised to really, really benefit in a renaissance like never before. I'll pause there. Happy to, if anybody dares ask another question. I want to welcome all our guests who are here tonight. I see some new faces. Well, welcome, and if there are no other questions or comments from any side of the aisle here, council or members in the audience, our next council meeting is Tuesday, April the 5th, 2022.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I love you guys. That's what I'm interested in. I love you.
If you want to talk more, go right ahead.
My wife says I can talk to a brick wall for 2 or 3 hours.
Never met a budget in a video.
That's right. Keep it rolling, baby.
I got so much great things going on.